Okay, was he good with that or is that?
All right.
Oh, I
All
know.
right. Today is Thursday, May 9th at 5 o'clock. This is the regularly scheduled Town Finance Committee. I'm calling this meeting to order and I have Counselor Shoup and Counselor Cushing and myself, Counselor Anderson present. Item number 3 is approval of minutes. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Second?
Any discussion?
No.
All right, can I, all those in favor? It's unanimous. All right, item number 4 is discussion on FY 2025 municipal school budgets. So let's start with the town side. I think the school might be a little bit late to this. Not here until like at least 5:30 is my understanding, so.
Sure, I'm pleased to hopefully carry it between now and then. I don't have too much to present. So Liam's going to put up on the board here. I call it the scorecard, kind of, the format's somewhat familiar. Apologize for the small font, but we wanted to try to keep this on one page. So essentially, again, you'll be familiar with the format. Everything, well, I should say the items shown in blue represent new items. These are proposals that I bring to you for your consideration based on the directive we gave at the workshop in terms of another 400,000. Again, just by way of background, this is broken up, school at the top, town at the bottom, and we've further broken it out by operating capital. Just it's an easier way, I think, to segment the different proposed adjustments. So the new ones that I'm suggesting you consider on the town side, we've had more time to do some more thorough review of our revenue estimates, and I can let Norm speak to it in deeper fashion if you like, but we do have confidence that our investment income will be greater than we previously had indicated in the proposed budget. And additionally, we do expect additional rescue revenue. I can tell you just from firsthand account, just listening to the sirens go by all day, every day. We've been very, very busy, and that translates into more billing. I'm very also comfortable that there's additional resources in that rescue revenue account to fund ambulance purchases when those come due. And that's always been kind of a target of us, that we sweep in as much as we can to cover operating costs, but we also are mindful of capital expense. And then under capital, there are three projects that I suggest you at least consider. These are all items proposed to be appropriated. The first is replacement of bleachers. This is down by the softball field here on campus. I think it was just putting new seats, if you will, on the metal structure. The other one is the Running Hill Road Master Plan. These are things that aren't exclusively, but they are prompted in large part by the potential the Gorham Connector going through. But I would argue that those are areas of town, North Scarborough in particular, in general, I should say, is an area that I think is in need of some further consideration. That's one of our oldest and most important villages that has been is unrecognizable in many respects today. So I'd love to give some thought and attention to that in the future, but again, it's not terribly pressing. And the final one is the facilities assessment. This is something I think for 3 years in a row we've talked about, and I did advance it for funding. This is something that I think we do need to do at some point, but again, it's not desperate. So I offer it up as an item that could be deferred if you wish. That brings this, if you're willing to accept those additional proposals with the prior ones, that brings the total reduction on the town side of 1.429 million for a total reduction. And this is exclusive of anything additional the school may bring forward this evening of 2.529. That's that final number on the sheet.
Great. Any questions or comments for Tom?
I did miss last week, so I apologize. The stormwater management consultation or feasibility study that we had talked about for $50,000. I don't see that. Was that cut? I mean, that would ideally be creating more income and taking away from residents a lot of the public works and the things that go under there.
Yeah, it wasn't cut because it was never included in the proposed budget. So if Liam, if you scroll to the next page, you should see, no, it's not there. I beg your pardon. But that was one of the items I've captured as an item in motion.
Okay.
So if you wish, that would need to be added into the budget, and we've
Right.
estimated 50,000 for that effort.
Mhm.
Counselor Cushing, any comments for Tom?
Yes, I have one thought with respect to the facilities assessment. I really think it would be worthwhile to have a conversation with the school about looking at unifying that. My experience has been always the facility side has been sort of a low budget operation, and we got a lot of, I guess I would say, free assessment services from vendors who were looking at bidding things and so on and so forth. So those two are sort of separate things, but I just wonder if seemed like we've done that with IT very successfully. So maybe in the next year, it'd be worth seeing if we could actually get some homegrown assessment. We're not denying the need, but and if that didn't turn out to be possible by unifying those, then it isn't. But it seems to me to be worth looking at.
That certainly has been an ongoing discussion. We've had actually detailed conversations with the school facility department, which is a well-established, very professional outfit. This, however, and that's something that we need to revisit, frankly. And I think there's great opportunity for crossover and supporting each other. This really was to hire an outside consultant to come in and do a full assessment top to bottom. So it would help inform our capital investment. We think that it also will identify opportunities to combine if we need one roof replaced and let's combine it with another. Maybe we can get better pricing with economies of scale. So I think there's two parts to it, but we see starting with a full assessment to kind of baseline where we are and what we're looking at over the next 10 or 20 years, I think is an important part of that equation.
Okay, thanks.
Where, for that one in particular, to Councillor Cushing's point, if something is not funded this year, what work could be done to make advancements for it to potentially be funded in 26?
Well,
Because that's what I would like to understand, because I feel like it's needed. The question is delaying it a year gonna do any damage, or is it?
I don't think so. We're aware, kind of near term, I would say that we're on a crisis mode, but as things break, we need to fix them. And there's things that we know that are, and I shouldn't at all suggest that we're not being proactive. We replaced nearly half of the HVAC systems in this building before they were end of life. We're faced with an end of life situation on our chiller outside, but we do have a pretty good line of sight to the age of our things, if you will. But I think there's great opportunity and economies of scale by looking globally and including school for us to be aware or them to be aware of our needs, so we can combine and probably even preventative maintenance to bid out single contracts to single vendors for maintaining our shared systems, if you will, or systems in common. So I think this can be deferred. You'll see it back because I think it is vitally important. But given, I think, the challenge in front of you, this is something that I think could be deferred without doing any damage.
Okay.
I think it's important to remember that the council set a net budget goal of 5%. And as our appreciation for what the effects of the reval are going to be, I think we required more pencil sharpening. And so if I've heard the term unique year once, I think I've heard it 1,000 times. And that for me, it's important to remember that what we are trying to do is respond to revaluation and to the impact of that on taxpayers, as opposed to suggest that this project or that
Mhm.
in any other year might be worthwhile and we wouldn't
Right.
think too much about it.
Mhm.
I would say going forward that it will not be a surprise to us that we're going to have revaluations in the years to come. And I think that when we do our goal setting and the like, we should take that into account. And when we think long-term in terms of budgets for the town, we should sort of look and say that plan for the fact that in a reval year, I think a responsible council is going to be saying, we're going to be, very careful with discretionary expenses in
Mhm.
those years.
I think what's unique though about this cycle is the economic situation that happened as a result of COVID. And I would expect 5 years from now, there could be some sort of economic situation, but I think that's important to understand, like, if things are pretty constant, then we would experience less of a impact. But I think what we're seeing is more the COVID impact, and everybody, like, it's just crazy if you look at Maine and how much across the board, even in other towns, home values have just skyrocketed. And so I think that's an anomaly, and hopefully, you know, I don't know, I can't predict the future, but I would say, in general, I agree with you. Like, when it's a reval year, there's probably a little bit more work to be done to set a goal that hopefully the town and the assessor can help guide what a good goal would be, so that we could start the process with more information with that in mind. So that way we can be thoughtful about what a responsible, reasonable increase.
And just
would
to,
be.
just to report where you're at, based on the reductions, adjustments of 2.5 and change. On a net budget basis, you're at 4.55% increase. And that translates exclusive of the reval to a tax rate increase of 1.8%. And that does not include fund balance in that report. If you choose to use the fund balance at the level I originally proposed, that brings your net budget increase down to 3.3%. And just over 0.5% increase in tax rate, exclusive of the reval.
So our goal was a 5% budget increase,
Net budget.
net budget increase, and we are at what right now? You just said
W-
for,
Without the use of fund balance, we're at 4.55%, and with it, you're at 3.36%.
so we already met our goal, which is awesome. And I realize we want to maybe go lower. I understand that we're all experiencing something unique right now, but we're also not unique in experiencing this right now. So like other towns in Scarborough are going through the COVID stuff, and I think, didn't Westbrook have a reval? And
Elizabeth did.
And so I think my question is, are other towns in response to COVID in revals, are they working towards a zero budget increase? Is this responsible? Is this realistic? I mean, I understand it's a unique situation for everyone in 2024, but it's not unique to anyone right now facing, I think, these issues. And I'm curious how other towns are dealing with it. I would love to see another town who's like, we don't care. We're gonna have what was the news? 10%, their taxes are going up, 10% budget increase. I don't know. I would be curious to see if other towns are going this low, considering how just the cost of living is substantially greater every year.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a good read on that. I am familiar with Westbrook. I think they were looking at a fairly steep tax increase. I don't know the particulars as to what's driving that, to be honest. So I beg your
I need a
pardon.
perspective. I really do, because I feel like, I understand the unique situation that we're in here, but also I'm not sure we're making the best responsible decisions when we are just cutting and cutting and cutting
Yeah.
and cutting, and we haven't even gotten
I
to school yet.
I don't think what you're assuming, which I don't think is correct, is that we can do an apples to apples
No.
comparison.
But I would
So,
like to see a
when you-
town that actually comes in once with a zero budget increase. Is that done? Do people do that? Is that
Sorry,
possible?
But my point is that when you look at our town, what's unique about our town, particularly our growth, that's a unique factor that impacts our net budget. And then when you look at other towns, I think we're very lucky that the school and the town, especially with ARPA funds, were very responsible with what they did. So I think what you're seeing in a lot of communities, especially the ones that are still having the big increases, tend to be not the best choices, I think, financially in terms of how they use those ARPA funds to fund operating budget items that now they're saying, well, we can't get rid of those things, we need them, but they don't have that extra ARPA money. So that's my understanding when I look at other towns for my own research, it's typically the fiscal cliffs that they've had to fall off that they're still correcting, which luckily for us, the town and schools were very thoughtful where we applied those ARPA funds. So that's my interpretation. But then I think also when you factor in our growth, which is unique to Scarborough too, relative to like Cape Elizabeth, that's experiencing a very different set of issues. Like, I
We've
think
had
you
a
have
lot
to
of
look at,
growth.
you have to look at what our town has, not just what other towns have, to really get to what makes the most sense for the community.
Yep. I mean, I counted 27 emails that I've received today that support the school and that people who have moved to this town who want their taxes to go up to continue the quality of life and things like that today.
Mhm.
And so I think it's just a perspective.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. I mean, I think that's the challenging part about our community in specific is it's pretty diverse with a lot of different perspectives. And our challenge is to look at that diversity and try and do the best we can to get everybody to a place that they can accept, but we'll never make everybody happy. There are people who want a 0% increase. There are people who want us to fund things with no worry about what that increase means for their tax budget. And so that's, to me, those are kind of the extreme sides of the equation. And what we have to do is look at it and say, is this a reasonable budget that stands on its own merits? And if so, then that's what we put forward.
Do you think our 5% was unrealistic? Because we're below it, but we still want to go lower. And that's where I've heard the school say, I thought we were there. And then
It
we're like, no,
was,
let's go more.
so the goal was less than 5%. So we are definitely in that area. It wasn't to be at 5%. So I think when new information comes before us, and again, I think it's what Councilor Cushing said, we didn't have the information about the revow. So for you, if that means you think sticking to 5% and minimal reductions is good for you, I mean, that's your choice as a counselor. And if that's what you want to support, then that's what you can support. The question is what does the council as a body want to do? And my understanding, at least from our workshop, was it's a little split. Like some people are probably comfortable keeping it higher, some are comfortable getting it lower. And what we have to do is try and find the middle ground and what the right recommendation would be.
Mhm.
And hopefully the majority support it.
And I just to speak to the 5% net, unlike most years where the tax rate is typically your target, given the fact that we all knew the reval was coming, we chose not to use that as your kind of your measure. So the net budget at 5%, history suggests that with our expected growth year over year, that produces pretty consistently and comfortably a tax rate year over year increase of less than 3%. And so that's why I think the logic behind the 5% net.
So to advance the town side, does anybody want to offer a motion? Or I'll offer a motion. I motion that we accept the town's recommendation to make adjustments to the budget at $1,429,966,000. Can I get a second?
Second,
All right, discussion?
and this is without using fund balance.
Yeah,
Right.
not, this is just accepting Tom's adjustments.
The total reductions from, I think, was it the original budget, the original proposed budget, or from was 2529745, is that correct?
That includes about 1.1 million on the school side that's been previously discussed before you.
Gotcha, okay.
Yep.
And so, right, plus what you just added to it. And our original goal was to get to a total of 3.3 million, is that correct?
I would say our original goal was a net budget proposal of
Well,
5%.
I'm sorry, I'm just going back to last meeting. So we left here saying the number we were trying to get to is 3.3 total. And we said we were gonna get another 4 from the town, another 8 from the schools, so my spreadsheet says we have 8 left. So with that understanding, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood what I'm voting on.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that from my perspective, the town has been responsive, creative, helpful. And I think in this year, you know, we can defer some things, wait on some things. And I don't see this budget as really gonna harm our state of living so far. So what remains is to see what the impact of the education
Mhm.
reductions are.
Again, I wasn't there last week, so I apologize. I just wanted to clarify on the fund balance because I mean, I do support using it. I know we're not to that part of the discussion, but I want to make sure that I'm answering this correctly and moving forward. Like I would support using the fund balance possibly for like a facilities assessment. Is that something that we can talk about later down the road? Is that a separate discussion?
Yeah, I think that the goal was, let's get to all of the reductions first and see where we stand. And then evaluate use of the fund balance to augment where we stand, which could be one of 2 ways. We didn't quite get to where we wanted to in the goal, and should we go the rest of the way? Or we got to where we wanted to, and now we can go a little further with all or none.
Mhm.
Um,
I would suggest we don't use fund balance as a means to add back in things. I think if there's a desire to add something back, that you can propose an amendment. If you want to add did you say facilities assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I worry about the compounding of delay of
Mhm.
next year, we've delayed, and now we're right back at square one of your taxes are going up because we delayed everything last year for you.
Mhm.
And so I don't know fund balance and finance to the extent that I'm asking questions, like, can we just use fund balance to fund these things that
Mhm.
we think are worthwhile, but are not operational?
So I'm supportive, Tom, of what
Mhm.
you've proposed, and I want to thank you for taking the challenge and coming up with things. I mean, when I look at what's really being deferred, it looks like it's really just 2 things. The rest of it, and of course, the proportional cuts that staff made. A lot of it seems to be adjustments that we've made throughout the process. We've got some new TIF monies, I think, that helped based on the assessment that was done. So this to me feels like a good place to end the process at this point, for us at least, to recommend to council and then let council go from there if there's other adjustments or amendments that they'd like to do.
Okay.
So with that, I'm gonna call a vote. All those in favor of the motion? Great. That's unanimous. So now, before we pull up the school, what I would like to just offer a suggestion for this particular committee, that rather than us offering a recommendation for use of fund balance or not, because I think that's really a council conversation, I would suggest we don't have a recommendation coming out of this body, but say if there's a counselor who wants to propose an amendment or something at the budget vote to further reduce or whatever, based on what we've gotten to here, let's let that counselor offer that amendment, and it may be an amendment I might offer. So I just want to make sure that we focus on the budget and let the fund balance be a bigger discussion at second read with the council and how we want to approach it.
I think that's fair, particularly in light of the fact that Chairman McGee polled us all at the last meeting. And so people kind of went on record as to what they thought about the whole thing. So,
Mhm.
so yeah,
Yeah, and it,
I support that. I think that's a bigger discussion, as it's controversial from some camps. So we'll leave. So I think clearly we're remaining neutral on the subject from the standpoint of this committee.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. It strikes me that counselors may feel differently about adjustments and use of fund balance, and by commingling, I think it complicates it. If you isolate the two, I think, it's maybe a cleaner discussion
Yeah.
for you.
Well, I think the conversation that I thought was the great point, we kind of, by my error, started with the fund balance and we should have started with the budget. And then the fund balance really becomes, well, where are we? How do we feel?
Yep.
Do we want to go further as a body? And that is a lever. Because do we want to pull that lever or not? But I think for me, it will ultimately depend on what we land on, I think, to know if we use it or how much of it we use. And so I'm not ready personally to say what that could look like, even though I am in favor, like you said, of using it to some extent, but what that looks like, I don't know yet.
Where I thought it was our job as a finance committee to give recommendations to council on using fund balance. So,
Yeah,
I mean, if I wasn't on finance, I would be sitting on council and I would not understand the nuances and I would be looking to you to give me a recommendation.
mhm.
So I feel.
On that point, one thing that would help me is to get clearer on if we used the proposed $945,000, would that have an adverse impact on our bond rating? And I've had emails that essentially are saying, well, the bond counsel was equivocal on the issue, not clear, etc. So can we say with some certitude that if we drop that fund balance by 945, that our bond rating would not suffer based on the evaluation, or is it a coin flip?
I don't think it's a coin flip. I think our advisor said that, one, if you have a policy, you need to follow it, which we do, and we are. I think we've got a very strong argument, not argument, but discussion point with the rating agencies that we're using it because of the uniqueness of the year. And that more importantly, we have a dedicated revenue stream that is essentially a guarantee flowing into fund balance. And in years past, in past rating calls, I haven't had the ability to have that level of confidence. And that revenue stream is coming from the Higas Parkway TIF district. It's paying ourselves back for the deficit that was created, which ends up being fund balance. And that's a unique set of circumstances.
So the bond people get nervous when they think you're starting to eat the seed corn. Is that fair? That's
Yeah,
that's an Oklahoma kind of expression.
Yes, yeah.
they do not want, and our advisor was very clear about this point, they do not want us to be using fund balance as a reoccurring theme to offset revenue costs, operating costs. And I think we've got 10 years of history to suggest that that's not our practice. And I think we've got a very particular set of circumstances that will explain why this is the year to do so. The final piece I would say is based on our confidence of where fund balance is today and where it is going to end up at the end of FY25, we're very likely in a position per your policy of needing to spend it per policy. And so whether you do it this year to address the reval challenges, or you do it next year to offset capital costs or refund to taxpayers, there's any number of choices your policy lays out. But I think more than likely you'll be in a position next year having to, if you want to follow your policy, using fund balance.
So
And
this is a
because
case
we're
of,
improving our fund balance, our ratio, I think that bodes well with the rating agencies that they're going to look at our use of fund balance, in my opinion, as a neutral item because we're well within our policy and we're near the upper limits. So we have a strong position with fund balance.
I mean,
And
I guess
and it's only about 20% of the rating grade anyway, so it's not going to move the needle much one way or the other.
The final thing I'll say, and I'm pleased to have our advisor here and walk you through the different areas that the rating agencies are concerned with. And the good news is they publish those. We know those. We can do the calculations. We are extremely strong in nearly all of those metrics that they're concerned with. The one area that I think we take some hit on or catches their eye is our per capita debt, where we do carry more debt than others. But all the other factors were kind of off the charts in terms of,
Sure.
in a good way, off the charts.
But I think if Mr. Gates were here, he would remind us that growth has something to do with that. And that the bond agencies sort of look at, you know, what is the trajectory of the town's growth, which obviously adds to the tax base, which makes them more secure.
Yeah,
So,
they're about assessing the risk of us repaying, honoring our debts and household income. Again, all the metrics that they are concerned with, our percentage of property tax collections is, 99%. So we are considered a fairly low risk. And the last thing I'll say about this is that it's, in my experience, we need to be obviously concerned about downgrade. For us to upgrade, because there's only a couple of spots for us to move forward. The sorts of things we'd need to do, particularly to strengthen our fund balance position, are things that I would argue that you don't want to do. The pain is not worth the reward. Potentially.
I think, the policy says optimal, which involves some level of satisficing. I'm saying that, we want the sweet spot, not the top spot. And because you get diminishing returns or too much expense trying to get the AAA, you don't get as much payback as you do for the cost of getting
Right.
there.
For us to move the needle in that regard, for Moody's in particular, who more highly values fund balance, we would need to be in the 16 to 20% fund balance range. For us to get there, with our, will require some concerted effort over an extended period of time. And even if we're successful in getting an upgrade, we're talking about, 10 basis points in terms of improvement on our interest rates. And I'm not dismissing how important that might be on a big bond issue, but for us to really move that needle upward is going to be exceedingly difficult.
So where this will really come into play, leave it at this, is that when we issue a school bond again. And so if I'm guessing, that's probably going to happen, sometime in the next 24 months. And based on what I've heard here today, we will have recouped what we have given back. But next time we're really going out into the bond market.
Certainly.
Seriously, is that fair to say? So
That is
right now, our bonds are locked in interest rates. Is that?
Yes.
I don't have a lot of variable risk out there.
We have no variable.
So the bond rating comes into play the next time we borrow a lot of money, and the likelihood that will be is when we borrow money for a new school. And based on what I've heard you say, that we will, if we take the 945 out, given your estimates of revenues that will come back in, those monies will be replenished by the time we need to get rated again.
Back to the chairman's point, I don't disagree. I think this is a matter for the full council to weigh in on. The way the budget's postured, however, my proposed budget does include that money in it. So if you wish to kind of level the playing field, and you need to remove it.
Mm.
And so that may be an appropriate motion to pull fund balance out of the budget. And then they can choose to put it all back, or part of it back, or none of it back.
Mhm.
Sorry, I know you want to move on, but I mean, first of all, I interpreted the bond memo of we could use it this year. We had every reason to, and it would not decrease our bond rating. I believe the experts. I know we've gotten lots of emails, but I haven't heard Norm or the bond guy tell us that this was bad. I think Tom said something today right now that's concerning to me that we as a finance committee have an obligation to talk about, is that we might have too much money in the fund balance next year, which wouldn't look good for us if this year we do nothing, have a 0% budget increase, and then suddenly we have this huge fund balance.
Mhm.
And I think that's something, I know it's late in the game, but to hear that right now, I think that's something that we should be considering in our determination moving forward.
I would say should be concerning to you. What I would
No,
say
but I
though,
think if it's gonna go up,
Sure.
I think that's a consideration.
Yeah, so that's in the last finance committee meeting, what Norm showed us was we're projected to be at about 12.7% of our fund balance, and that are higher than our policy goal. And after we go over 12% by policy, we have options. We can put it towards capital, we can give it back to taxpayers. Like Tom mentioned, so
Mhm.
if we stay on the path that we're on, knowing what's happening with the Higas Parkway, next year, the committee will have to make a decision on how to use that excess based on our policy. So the question is this year, knowing the challenges of the revow and knowing what we got from the, our bond council and, just our, really strong payment of our debt, do we want to do something this year with it? And I think that's the debate that I think council is kind of still digesting. And so I think that's where I'm suggesting, let's get through the school piece. Then if we have time, we can look at that and say, do we want to debate fund balance application and what that recommendation
Sure.
could be, or
We've
motion to
model that
remove
we
it?
can pull up on the screen and show you. Again, the only relevant, I say the only, why that's relevant, Counselor Shoup, is that there has been some suggestion that the mere proposal of using fund balance is kind of irresponsible. We're in a position per your policy of as soon as next year, needing to spend it. And again, you can choose to do something other than what your policy says, but I think it's important to keep in mind that this is not a out of the blue, a reckless proposal, in my view.
So with that, let's move on to the school, invite our school friends up so that we can review what they've proposed.
Space.
Just one quick question while we're getting reassembled. The 2529745 of reduction for your spreadsheet. What am I reading here? A 1.8% change in the tax rate. I'm looking at the spreadsheet that you sent us.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, exclusive of the impact of the reval, year over year, yes.
Okay. And, right, and then we still have the ability to take a little more out from the school. And that is exclusive of fund balance, right? That
Correct.
2.59. So, all right, I just wanted to be sure I understood that.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So I know we got some late breaking stuff from you guys that it probably would be really helpful to walk through that.
More need paper.
Yeah, if you have extra paper, that would be great.
You know I have.
So Liam's gonna pull it up, Kate, just so you know, we included in kind of the scorecard, where we ended last finance meeting, in the packet. If you want, that's kind of where we are. And then there's the additional piece, which is now projected up, which is,
Thank you.
perhaps the subject of discussion.
It sounds like they already have the blue one. Oh,
No, we'll take both.
what you need is more paper.
Almost that. Yep.
And just a quick question, Tom, for you for clarification. So this 2.5 you have in here, that what from this is or is not included?
Nothing,
Okay,
nothing. Liam, if you can go to the prior page. That's the sheet that we ended your last conversation on. And so, the 2.5, the number you just adopted,
Mhm.
includes the adjustments that had been previously discussed and are included in that number, but nothing beyond that.
Okay.
It's the 1099.
Right.
Yeah.
You
And
can
is
try
that still inaccurate or have things from this list
Right.
been
So,
That's where
adjusted?
this starts.
Okay,
right. So the target was 800 more.
Yeah.
And that's what you're going to explain to us. Is
Correct.
How
Okay.
close you came and
Yep.
what the impact of that is. Okay.
So I guess just to tie it all together then, so at second reading, at our second reading, Board of Ed approved the reduction of a 1.1 million reduction. And then it came to you guys, and the council asked for what a further reduction would look like. And that would bring us to a 1.98 million reduction from our first reading. So potentially $880,000 of a further reduction. So after that conversation, Kate and the entire leadership team, they really worked very, very hard to
take a look at what our potential reductions would be, including what some of the consequences would be if we did do some of these reductions. So we understand that the town is trying to make things a little bit easier with the reval coming up, but when we discuss this, I can say that it's not something that we would necessarily recommend, because these are really hard choices for everybody here to make. The consequences would affect daily operations, student well-being, education, and would be a bigger ask in the next budget. And I heard Tom say earlier, the pain is not worth the reward. So, Kate, if you don't mind, I would like for you to just, I'll shift it over to you so you can kind of talk the numbers and I'll kind of fill in with the consequence info, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah, so, I don't think you ever get anything from us that isn't color coded, because, that's our MO. And the color coding in this particular document is, I hope, fairly familiar. Green, yellow, blue, green, yellow, red. And the green at the top, the two sections at the top are divided into least impact and new proposals, least impact. Because there's a lot of conversation about, what was level services budget and what was proposed to add to that in the coming year. In that section, the reductions that we make, you can see the details there, and I'm happy to speak to those, and so will Jenna, I think. But the reductions in that green section get us to just a little bit over the, I guess we'll call it the second ask of the Town Council Finance Committee, which was after we met with you folks in your workshop on April 11th, we brought to the table on that day a reduction of $368,000. And the recommendation was made that we find another $1 million. So when you draw the line under the green, you're at a total reduction from first reading of $1,385,000. Which just slightly exceeds the request on April 18th to get to $1,368,000. The remainder of the $880,000 that we talked about last week is in the next two sections. The orangey yellow section, won't tell you what color Tom called that earlier today. It's not a very pretty color, refers again to new proposals, to new positions. And then the bottom section, the pink section, is
More salmon, I think. Was that what Tom said?
salmon.
No, that's what I said.
The bottom section, in whatever lovely rose color that might be, is more related to accounting adjustments, turnover, unfilled positions, and overall department reductions, as well as the last item, which is an additional use of unassigned fund balance, increasing our current non-tax revenue taken from unassigned fund balance, which is at 1.5 million, and changing that to 1.6. And you may recall from our conversations earlier that we're at a $2.1 million unassigned fund balance today, without including what we will likely have as a gain for FY24. So I'll pause there for a minute. Jenna, if you have things you want to fill in.
Yes. So I guess we can start with like maybe the green area. So our least impact, but even though we say least impact, but it to us, it's a big impact. Some things like our new superintendent, it might be, it's helping us because she's not utilizing some of our benefits here. So those were kind of easy, but then having, deferring our truck replacement, that would cost more in maintenance work for it. So I think we had a conversation with Todd and said it was maybe okay for now, but yeah, we will have to spend more on keeping it running. And then The next line, reducing out of district estimate. So there was a conversation about a specific student who would be likely changing, it's not official, but likely changing their plan, and might not need a specific type of out of district placement. And that was the amount that was estimated for that. So those were, easier to talk about. And then we had a conversation about the library ed tech position. Wentworth were willing to trade ed techs for a one full-time librarian for, was it 3 days a week, I believe she said?
So currently what they have is 2 ed techs and a librarian who comes half the time, which is 2.5 days a week. And our proposal was to add a full-time librarian. This librarian that we currently have works at 4 different schools and hasn't been a very fruitful model for many years now. And so the proposal was to have 1 librarian shared among the 3 primary schools and 1 librarian to get dedicated completely to Wentworth School. This change would be taking one of the ed techs who currently works at Wentworth and trading that position in, for lack of a better word, so that now you would just have a librarian and an ed tech at Wentworth full-time instead of the 2.5, 2.6 FTEs that we have now. And the willingness to make that trade is because the value of a professional position, with no disrespect at all to our amazing ed techs, is greater. That person has more capacity to advance the use of the Learning Commons model in our libraries.
Mhm.
So I mean, we have, I think, one of the biggest municipalities in the state, and I'm just kind of curious how other towns are doing it. I don't know if you saw my Council Corner article, but it does discourage me that my son does not get to the library. And I do feel like there is value behind having a real librarian in the library, teaching and encouraging students and making them feel comfortable in the library. And I think I want more. I think there should be a librarian there. I think the kids should be in the library more. And I'm just kind of curious how other towns our size are doing it. I'm feeling a lot of pressure from the 27+ emails that we've received from residents in the last 24 hours who moved here specifically for the education. And seeing these little cuts are really bothering me. So I'm curious if this is what towns our size are constantly faced with, or if we are just making way too many compromises right now, and some of the people that have moved here are not very happy, me included.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as library media and having a teacher and a professional in that position, and really librarians now really maintain Learning Commons. It's a model also that pushes into the classroom, and there's just a ton of co-teaching that happens with teachers. And as you're saying, not only getting kids in the library, but getting the library into the classroom as well. And so that's a model that is definitely common in other towns, and is money well spent. And this position in particular, the library position for the K-2 schools has been an ongoing need and request, for multiple years. And frankly, I think it's time. I mean, half the district being served, students being served by one, library media professional is definitely not the norm.
And then changing this also would affect how the school schedules class time and business time in that space.
Yeah, and it's a little bit, honestly, like it's a bit of a sacrifice, even to sacrifice that educational technician that's been working in the library space and coordinating with teachers. But we felt that was a reduction that would do the least harm to making sure that we have 2 full-time library professionals at the K-5 level, which, given our enrollment of close to 3,000 kids, K-12 is very much very much needed.
Am I missing anything in the green, Frayla?
I was just going to say, Karen, I don't honestly know specifics about how other districts are staffed. I know just anecdotally, I've spoken to people who are a little surprised at our numbers. But it's something that we could find out.
I mean, I'm a town councilor, I'm not a school board member, but I feel like library is very important, especially at such a young age.
Yeah,
Well, and I think that's why, as we consider this budget process and we understand that we have to sometimes make some forced choices, right? I think this is a great example of that because you hear us making a forced choice over maintaining a librarian position instead of, keeping that ed tech because we do see the real need for our youngest students at K-2 to have the benefit of a librarian.
I'd like to add another point in that one of the problems that we face as a district is maintaining a single librarian in that position who gets to invest in our learning commons and our students and our faculty. Because there are easier places where you don't have to travel between 4 jobs, you don't have 4 offices, you don't have 1,500 kids to service. And so it's not a very competitive position. We've had turnover for the last 3 years.
That's not doable.
It's because we're asking that person to do too much and they're not servicing the kids out of it.
Yeah, we've had 3 librarians in one position in 4 years.
and we have a really super one right now. It's so like to hang on to.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep going through the list.
Okay. Safe for us to move on to the yellowish, orangish area, okay. So now we're talking a little bit more impact here. And when we were talking to leadership and I really appreciated the conversation with our leadership team. So the 3 things here, deferring middle school student support increase, defer a WIN teacher at Wentworth, and I will go into that, and defer a Pleasant Hill kindergarten intervention teacher. With the WIN teacher and the intervention teacher, these positions, while not, well, I guess the WIN teacher, while not an actual position right now, it's probably not kosher for us to remove the position. This position is for a loss of early general ed students, so education. So this is intervention for students who might just need more time, but not necessarily need a referral. However, if this position isn't there to kind of guide those students in the way that they can, the risk then is they become students with referrals, and then that becomes a mandated thing in our budget. So that there's also that piece to it. So for instance, we heard the example of a multi-language learner in 5th grade who's still learning to count forward while peers are moving on to adding and subtracting fractions, and not necessarily needing special ed services, but just needing time to kind of get into the rhythm and exposure and get used to being in this new school district and working up to the rest of their peers.
Yeah, and I would just add that model of general ed interventionist, essentially, which is, again, a teacher who's co-teaching with other classroom teachers and working with kids who require some additional individualized instruction and support, but aren't necessarily kids who should be referred or would be classified as a child who would be referred for special education or specific learning disability. These are students, as we're talking about, that require some additional support that we can do along with their general ed teachers And we have a bridge teacher at the middle school that follows this model very effectively. And so doing something similar at Wentworth is key, I think, to supporting these learners and making sure that we're not, I mean, I think everyone is concerned when you look at, the costs associated too with a higher percentage of students who are in special education. We want to make sure that we also have the right interventions in place to make sure that we're servicing the students appropriately. And that's really the need for that position at Wentworth, as well as the intervention teacher at the kindergarten. Also understanding that we've already now in early May have a kindergarten class over 200 students.
Can I tell a story about our Wentworth population? So our new population at Wentworth, third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade next year. They did kindergarten and first grade at home or hybrid for a year. Their literacy reflects that. Their ability to sit and attend was impacted greatly because of foundational learning skills that are taught at kindergarten, critical time, sitting and attending to a teacher, following directions, were not able to be taught in the same way that it would in a classroom. And parents did their best and teachers did their best, but it wasn't the same. So these are kids that are coming in and there is learning loss from COVID. We would all like to have COVID in the rearview mirror, goodness knows, and then never talk about it again. But we are coping with the consequences of what that meant for these learners. So they are coming in having been deprived of a couple years of normal education. And so those interventions are really meaningful for these students. If you are a second grader who is struggling to read, not with a diagnosis, but maybe you don't like books and maybe it's a little harder for you. You did kindergarten at home on a computer, and then you went into first grade and you're trying to catch up with your students. Having someone able to push into your third grade class, pull you aside for a few minutes and give you a little bit of extra help so that you can stay with your peers, that you can meet your targets and you can thrive in that environment is vitally important. The alternative is really letting that kid struggle, having the teacher try to pull them out when they have time with their other classroom responsibilities, and hoping that with vague support, they can do that. It really deprives that third, fourth, and fifth grader of a target at that point. And that is a foundational time for literacy, right? We know that the average American reads at a third grade level. If we can push in at that point, we can pop that up for folks so that they can go on and pursue what they want. Because these third graders go into junior high, which God knows is not an easy school, and then they go into high school. And we want them to have every opportunity that they want to be able to pursue. But if you can't learn in third grade and it's miserable and you're embarrassed, it gets harder every year.
So the last section, I haven't come up with the right word for it, but I guess I called it accounting adjustments. Because it doesn't impact a person who is currently with us. It doesn't impact necessarily programs that are currently happening. What it does is it limits our ability to fully staff. It limits our ability to be flexible with our budget because it reduces the overall budget. And it creates a little bit of a jump in the coming year, because if we keep FY25, what I'll call artificially low, then FY26, we go back and say, oh, here's what we really need. It's a bigger jump. We have heard a lot of conversation about corporate models and how accounting works out in the real world, and the fact that folks take into account turnover savings and these kinds of accounting adjustments all the time. What are the chances that you're going to fill all your positions? Well, we may not get to 6, So there's nothing intrinsically wrong with these things. But again, we're asked to show what are the consequences. And in the municipal model, we as a school department under statute return any surplus that we have to the taxpayers in the ensuing year or following 3 years of the budget cycle. We also aren't permitted to spend any more than what we're authorized to spend at the budget referendum. So we always have to come in under budget. And when our budget is reduced, it reduces our flexibility and our ability to react to any kind of circumstances that may occur during the course of that fiscal year. So that's the story behind that.
You had said that these operating budget adjustments don't really affect anyone, but I'm curious, I mean, who is doing the custodial work if you have an unfilled position? And then who's doing the bus driving if you have an unfilled position? So is that actually affecting a current employee though?
There are no employees affected, but we are currently using funds for contracted services. So that's a very good question. We
So-
have,
Yep.
I mean, we're not,
But I would also add, like, to your comment / question. Current employees are affected because
yeah.
our current employees are doing more,
right.
right? So our
Absolutely.
bus drivers are, dropping kids off in the morning, and then they're, picking up a group. I mean, Jeff got to play bus director today, so he had a good feeling of what that was like. And so our current employees are doing more, being asked to do more, and we have to also expend on the regular basis, as Kate was saying, we have to engage third-party contractors because, to continue with the example of transportation, we still need to make sure that all of our students get to and from school every day. We do not cancel buses. Certainly, there are other districts around us who send emails on the regular. Sorry, bus 14, no bus for you this week. Bus 23, you're canceled this week. Scarborough Public Schools has made a really deliberate choice not to do that. In some cases, we do unfortunately have to send emails out to families and say, your bus is going to be late because we've got a driver again who's working for us, who goes and does their run and then goes back and does the run for somebody who is out sick. And then we're also hiring third-party services. We're working with 4 different vendors at this point to help us transport our students. And so obviously that is not at a zero cost. So we're using funds that we would have been able to hire employees at, and that's going over to contracted services. Not a small amount of money.
Is anyone listening that has a CDL license?
Yeah. Well, and the tricky part with transportation too is when you contract out, you're contracting out a driver and a vehicle.
Right, you can't just hire a driver to drive one of our buses, right? So if we call custom coach, it's X amount of dollars for this trip today, and they're pulling up in their own vehicle with their own driver.
Mhm.
They're not our employees.
That seems more expensive than one bus driver, but I don't know.
That's right.
It is. If you were to replace all of the people that are working and not be doubling up and doing these, really super creative things, then you would be spending way more money. We only use the contractors in a pinch. But they're costly, and one trip can be $1,000.
I mean, we have one school to move to custodial services. We have one school that we're using an outside vendor daily to take care of the cleaning that has to be done, because we do not have enough of our own custodial staff to cover all 6 schools.
Clearly, I'm not a fan of this exercise right now.
All right, any other items on this that you guys?
Can I highlight
Yeah.
another issue?
Yeah.
So in that pink box, and I like the color pink, so somebody gets it. I think one of the things that I don't want to get lost is that flexibility. And so a good budget, whether you're at the kitchen table or at a municipality or at a corporation, is budgeting for unseen contingencies. And that's not unusual in school. So the first contingency that's happening in real time right now, so kindergarten class, as I think Jeff mentioned, is well over 200 already. That is way larger than typical. Our typical class is around 180. So we're looking at an enormous uptick there. This is not unknown or unpredicted through the enrollment studies. And also, we keep saying 2027, like there's like a crisis here that's coming up. 2027 doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it doesn't happen on January 1st of 2027. It happens because every kindergarten class from here on out until 2027 is gonna be that size. And that's gonna trigger the population crisis of the schools, which is why we're gonna run out of space at that time. So we anticipate a very large kindergarten class next year and after that. And we service people, if kindergartners show up on the first day of school or the second day of school, and they haven't registered because they didn't know about it or they didn't access it for whatever reason, they still get service. They still get a classroom assignment. They still get educated. If they move in the district, they still do too. So we do need to build in some funds as responsible budgeters to be able to adjust to that. The other thing is this, up at the top, I think the starkest example of an unforeseen contingency that's very realistic in our climate is that an out-of-district estimate. So that $70,000 is set by statute. It's not negotiable. That's tuition for out-of-state placement.
Mm.
If a student moves into our district that we don't know about and needs an out-of-state placement on day one, that 70,000 goes right back in our budget. And it doesn't matter if you funded it or not, we will find the money. We have to find the money to pay for it.
Mhm.
If a family moves into our district in December that we didn't know about, and their IEP requires an out-of-placement, district placement, we have to pay that money for that tuition, no matter what we budgeted for.
Mhm.
So I'm very concerned about stripping out all of this extra free money that doesn't hurt anybody. Because if we do run into that situation and we have a placement or two that's unforeseen, that $140,000 comes out of some line in our budget, no matter what, and that has an immediate effect. If we haven't foreseen that that's a possibility, and we're not trying to hoard money, but we also have to be responsible. And we can't put ourselves in a position where we dig ourselves a hole that come January, February of next year, we have to figure out a way to dig out of at a cost that we're not willing to pay because we didn't plan ahead.
Mhm.
Modestly, again, we should not be overspending taxpayer money. I am very sympathetic for tax bills going up. I anticipate a large jump in my own tax bill, and my family will feel that pinch. Everybody's family will feel that pinch. But we have to balance that. I think someone said it better than I ever could say, that pain today is not worth the cost of tomorrow. And so that's one of the reasons that makes me very anxious.
Mhm.
Because I don't think it's responsible to go so low that you can't adjust the things that we have to be able to adjust for and that are reasonably foreseeable. We don't know about an out-of-district placement right now, but they don't give us this. They just show up.
All right, any comments or questions?
Well, I have a comment. First, thank you.
Mhm.
I get that this was hard, and it was at least one of the people who was asking to get into this level of detail and to explain this is where the money comes from and this is what the cost is. And I think you've done a terrific job with that. I think that you are all superb advocates for the kids of our community, and that's commendable to me. I think that, like everybody else, my email is filled up recently, thank you, with people who support you. I also, and I think others do, have a lot of emails from people who say, yeah, but I'm worried about my tax bill, particularly in this year. I've been a long-time resident and I'm thinking I may have to move, those kinds of things. So the choices that we make sort of translate to hard choices on both sides of the equation, and that we have to be mindful of that. And you know, I won't say too much about it. I got a little peek at the new school survey. And my only observation is this town is split right down the middle in terms of support for education in this community. Not making a judgment about that. I'm just saying that that is a fact. And so the question is, particularly in this year when we know what we have coming, are some of these choices a way of saying to the 50% of people in the town for whom education at this point in their lives is more of a concept than it is a day-to-day reality of trying to get your kids on the bus. Does it make sense to say, at least in some year, we hear you, to say, that this could be a tough year on the school side, but it's not the only year. And there are other things coming down the pipe. So in effect, and I'm not advocating for this position, I'm asking a question, is to say to the taxpayers, look, we get it, okay? We understand that this is difficult for everybody. And here are the kinds of choices that we have to make to get to the trade-off. My gut is a lot of people would say, well, no, that's too far, okay? But I think that folks deserve the choice. So where I'm sort of at with this is that this feels to me like we've gotten it to the point where we need to have the full discussion of the council. We need the community engagement. We need to have the debate now for the next reading. And so, which is not to say, I could go down this list, and I said I would not do that, and say, well, this one seems reasonable to me, that one seems too hard, etc. There's not a thing on here which in a perfect world, you'd say these can't be justified, okay? But we are in a little different time. So my thing on this is I really appreciate the hard work that you did. I really appreciate what you've done to explain how these choices actually impact what goes on in the school. And I think that some may conclude that those choices would be penny wise, foolish. But I think that the public, the full council deserves to have that full debate.
Can I say one thing, or just a request of the council as this board, as this committee considers this and the full board considers it? I hear what you're saying. I really do. And I'm worried because there's this narrative and dialogue that's kind of bubbling to the surface where we're really pitting two groups against each other. And it looks very much like we're saying, it's these folks that have to lose, or it's these folks that have to lose. That worries me because I don't see Scarborough as I believe that we should be able to disagree passionately and yet still come together as a group town and believe in each other and support each other for what we need. I understand that people with not a direct link to the school or even a tenuous link to the school value that less because they have different considerations on their mind, and I fully respect and support them. But my plea to you is, to the extent that we can not look like we're pitting two groups, all of whom are worthy, everyone who lives here is worthy of consideration of this council and our board, against each other so explicitly. I just feel that it drives this us versus them mentality, and I don't want to see anyone suffer. I don't want to see the 1,800 taxpayers who are losing the tax benefit that they were given last year. I don't want to see that. I didn't vote for that. I wouldn't have supported that. I don't want to see anyone moved out of their home or have to leave or not be able to afford medicine or groceries or make those type choices. I don't want to see anyone in our community suffer. I don't want to see that for our school children either. And to the extent that we can work on mutual gain and not look like it has to be a win or loss, I would ask that you focus on that, because I really don't want to. I don't want to fight any group in this community. I don't want to see people suffer.
Mr. Schupany.
So obviously I don't support further cutting the school budget. I was concerned with the cuts that you guys were originally making, never mind this exercise that you went through. My heart hurts doing this. I mean, some of these positions are directly people who have helped my own children and have intervened with my children. And I think there's a huge value behind the intervention in some of these positions that you have. I will continue to advocate with the full council to not continue these further reductions. I think one of the questions I had or concerns I have is, the more we cut, what happens if the budget doesn't pass? And I think that is a huge consideration that I think maybe the council needs to think about before we make further cuts is I don't know which direction this board, the school budget would go. If we said, okay, we want you to make this extra $800,000 and $800,000 cuts and still vote it down. I mean, where are they going? Down further? I mean, that's a question. I would imagine the only way to go is back down. And so, I mean, I guess I'm talking to my counselors where I'm saying I'm very concerned that even going through this exercise gives people the idea that this is an option. For me, this is not an option. I think these are all very important positions. And as we discussed, we're relying on current staff, even though maybe we're not paying them for it, there is a lot of stress on the current staff. Filling in the voids here and things like this. And we are talking about we have very vulnerable students here. And Scarborough has a reputation for special ed, and I can say it is a great special ed program and I want it to continue. And so some of these are the exact tools I think that continue it because you have these early interventions and things like that. So my fellow counselors, I'm just telling you, and this is what I'll say next week is, I think this was a hard exercise. I do not think some of the residents who moved here for this town appreciated this at all. I think the emails we got were just like, I can't believe you're doing this. And they had a lot of other not nice things to say to us about it. I value what you guys do. I think you know exactly what you're doing. I think you've done everything you can to date. This is my second time on finance. I do not remember it being this hurtful and painful last year. I'm hoping that this is just an abnormal year, and that's where I will circle back around and say it is an abnormal year and we should think about some fund balance.
All right, my turn. Well, again, I just want to echo what Counselor Cushing said in terms of thank you for doing the work and bringing us something forward for consideration. I know throughout this process, it's been challenging because of the fact that we've, started with a goal and then we got more information. It's caused us to kind of rethink what good looks like. And I don't think, and I totally hear what you're saying, Freyla, in terms of pitting two groups against each other. And for me, it's more, we do have a very diverse community. And I think in that diversity is a lot of strength. However, in that diversity requires a lot of compromise. And so in my opinion, what we're trying to get at this year is a real compromise solution that in my mind does everything that we all, I think, agree is important. We want to keep people in their homes. We want to be sensitive to the tax rate. We want to maintain quality education services, support our students. And so for me, it's how do we do all those things to the greatest extent possible so that there isn't a winner and a loser, that there really is a good solution that hopefully maximizes the benefit to everyone. My personal perspective is I definitely am not supportive of a $1.98 million adjustment at all. Like, I think that would definitely cause harm that I would want to avoid, and I don't think that's necessary. But I do feel like when I look at what was originally proposed with the 1.1 million in adjustments, a lot of those things are really adjustments. They're minor tweaks or things. And I still feel like there is room for getting to that 1.4 million total that we had originally requested. How you guys get there, if it really requires these choices, which I think agree are all, have pros and cons and have different risk exposure. I think that's up to the school ultimately to kind of figure out what makes the most sense to try and reduce that risk. But I personally feel like we can get to a $1.4 million reduction and not really create harm. I think these are things that I wouldn't like to see you guys have to do, but this year, is a year of having to make tough choices. So with that, I'm going to motion that we put forward a recommendation to the council to adjust the original budget from the school from its original budget to a reduction of 1.4 million. Can I get a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah,
Where did that number come from?
So that was originally what we had asked for, was the 1.368782. I'm just rounding up to 1.4 for ease of discussion.
so very often things come before us from the departments, committees and so forth, an ordinance with a recommendation ought to pass or we want this to move forward. In my view, that's not the case here. I think that my personal preference is that what we are saying is that the town and the school have done what we asked them to do. They have presented this town with choices to make. They presented the three of us and the remaining four with choices to make. And then ultimately, they have presented, will be presenting this to the town. I disagree that we should be strategic in what we present to the town. I think we should go at it like we have one bite of the apple and put out there what we think is our best work and let the voters decide on that. And so my recommendation is that we move this forward with a comment that says, thank you very much. Our job as a finance committee was to do our best to create it's financial scrutiny, whatever the term is, but to say, let's get this down to a place where it does reflect some hard choices. And now let's give the council and the community an opportunity to make those choices. I would go further to say that I was delighted to see my email fill up with passionate advocates for the school. And I would be just as delighted to see the council chambers fill up with people who are advocates for whatever their point of view is. I think that if a discussion around our budget was as robust as we've had around the cannabis ordinance, that would be a step in the right direction. So I've said this over and over again, that voters have a responsibility to get engaged, to advocate, to step up and to ask their representatives to represent them and to say, this is how we'd like to be represented. So my feeling here is you've done a great job. This has been a hard process. We've asked you to do some difficult things. We've asked the town to do some difficult things. Now, each one of us has our own sensibilities about whether we think those are just right, not enough, and so forth. And it's time to get it out of this committee and move it on to the group. That's my thoughts.
Okay, Councilor Shoup.
Again, I guess I'm just concerned about where we go if this is voted down. So, I am struggling with this. So we'll see.
Yeah, all right. So with that, I'm gonna call the vote, or what, before that, I'll just add,
Could you clarify?
It
what
was-
is it we're gonna vote on?
we're voting on recommending an adjustment to the school total budget by a reduction of 1.4 million
Effectively, that would be $300,000 more than has been previously discussed.
in the packet right now.
Yes.
300,221.
Sorry, say that again?
300,221.
300,221.
The accounting nerd has.
Well, part of that 300,000 was,
Confused. Saying we got what the town gave us. The school just came back in with 880. We had those together. And that's what the adjustment is. I think that
no, we're not adding the 880.
we're not. in-
This
No,
number, yeah, I want to
I
clarify.
motioned, what I'm motioning for is we take the 1.1 million that exists in our packet and add in an additional 300,000 to that number, so that this number would be 1,399,779. So let me be clear. My motion is to adjust what's in the packet, the 1,099,779 to 1,399,779. And that's what we
You
would-
want the motion to be an even 1.4 million? If you want to get to an even 1.4 million, you need 300,221 to get there. So it would be some combination of their.
Well, I just don't want to get so caught up in the details of what the adjustments need to be. What I want to just say is, I think there's 300,000 additional from what has been provided to date.
So is your intent to get to 1.4 million and have staff make
Yes.
the decision on
What that
the
actually looks
details of the,
Mhm.
okay.
I'm gonna need a little more clarification because, I know they had said, they first came back and were like, oh, we have $300,000 left, because something didn't cost as much. And then we said, we want you to cut another million.
Mhm.
But that's not, and now you're saying on top of that,
So this is already inclusive of that 300.
okay.
Yeah.
And then you're adding what to this? You're saying out of here, we want you to cut more?
I'm not saying, so all I'm suggesting is, right now in our packet,
We have it on the screen here,
On the
right?
screen.
what was originally proposed up to this point was the 1.1 million.
Okay,
And that's inclusive of everything that's happened up to this point, including the insurance. So I'm just sticking us to what the original ask was come back to us with a 1.4 million adjustment. They have options of how they could get there. It's gonna be ultimately up to the school to make the choices that they feel like are the most important based on those risks to get to that 1.4. But I would motion that we bring to council a recommendation that we say a net adjustment of 1.4 million.
Which you-
I would like to
how
stay at
much are we-
1.1,
How much are we short?
and that's where we're at, right?
I don't, we can run the numbers. Can you run the numbers to let us know at this point, Norm?
Well, if your motion is 1.4 million, then you're 580,000 short of your 1,980,000 target that you gave last week.
Rather than talking targets, we can tell you what the effect of that is
Yeah,
on
that's
various
right.
metrics, if that would be more helpful. Norm, can you share your screen and pull that sheet up?
Do math in public.
I'm gonna math. in
Carla says she
public.
doesn't math in public.
Okay. Okay, so this is a model that we put together. I'll give our assessor, Nick Cloutier, credit for design and teamwork for adaptation, but it like the school, we brought you a color coded spreadsheet. The yellow is modeling the tax rate based on what Nick thinks the revaluation will end up. What we want to concentrate on is on the right-hand side, the peach, salmon, pick your name. This is using the valuation based on non-revaluation years where we take 90% of the growth to get to the valuation. So we start with our proposed, what we submitted as, can't get there. Proposed is this line. So that was a 3.64 change in tax rate. And the next line takes out the fund balance that was proposed, 985,000. Gets us to 1674 and 4.8. And so before tonight, we had 2.5 million in reductions. And that was included in your packet. That includes the extra 400,000 that we identified on the town. And so just now you want to add an additional 300,000 to that.
Correct.
So if we put in that number will get us to, I can't put it in the right spot.
Where did the 300 come from?
That is the motion Counselor Anderson
Yeah.
put forward.
Okay, so that 300,000 was what's needed from previous reductions to get the school to 1.4 in total. So that would get us to a 1.45% increase
Exclusive of the revale.
exclusive of the revow.
Mhm.
And then you can,
Mhm.
the next line would be your opportunity to model any other items you want to put in, like use of fund balance or.
Can you show us what this looks like if you add in the 985 fund balance?
If you were to add in the 985. That would get you,
So this is,
the result would be a 0.28% increase in the tax rate, and the mill rate would be 1601
so essentially I'm saying,
before we talk about revaluation.
And the net budget goes to just below 3%.
it is really the increase that we had asked from our last ask.
I didn't think I was confused, but I do think I'm confused now. When I left last week, I thought that we were going to come back here with another 400 grand from the town and another 800 from the school.
Mhm.
And so the 2.59745 number includes for that additional 400.
Additional 424,000 from the town side.
Okay, so now up comes the school. And they show up with their 880, right? And so the number that I would put in the red box here would be 880. Try that.
Okay,
Well, that's not the motion that's in
that's
front
not
of
the
you.
motion.
I understand that.
But just so we're clear, it's not the motion, but I'll put it in.
Well, I understand that, but
Would you like that, Mr.
I'm
Chairman?
trying to square up the motion with what we actually ask people to do. And so we come back here with 4 that's in there and 8 that you presented here. And my view is that the numbers that we move forward should reflect that. And we should not be recommending it. We should be saying, this is what the number looks like with these kinds of changes or other similar ones. Now, what do you want to do, council? That's,
Council, I appreciate this being your first time. In my experience, it's much,
candidly, Tom, I'm tired of it being my first time. Okay.
Well, I just, no, our,
What am I missing?
our,
I'm just saying it's easier to provide a discrete proposal for the council to consider as opposed to not. And that would be my recommendation to you, whatever that is.
Then put $800,000 in.
Fair enough.
Okay, and see what, and see what that model looks like.
There it is.
yeah.
There it is.
That gets us to a less than 1% increase. And I'm not endorsing it. I'm saying this is what we asked folks to do. And they've done it. And so why would we move something else forward to the council?
I heard clearly from the council in the workshop discomfort with getting to that number. And so the objective was for this information to be presented, for us then to make a recommendation from this information. And as I said, I think 800,000 in addition to what we started with, for me, is too high. And so my compromise is to say, I think a 1.4 total reduction, which was what originally was in here, feels like a reasonable compromise that, you know, takes into consideration all the different factors that we're trying to take into consideration between different diverse opinions about what's good for this budget. And if that's what we put forward for council, then a counselor could always motion to increase, decrease anything that's in the budget based on what they would want to do. But in terms of what we would provide as a finance committee recommended amendment, because that's essentially what we would do, we would be proposing an amendment to the entire budget order at the next meeting. But we have to give Tom the direction to prepare that amendment. And so my ask is to vote on right now, an amendment that basically recommends adjustment of $1.4 million from the school budget, not a
Okay.
$1.98 million.
All right, now I know what it is I'm voting on in relationship to what we have just been discussing. And my opinion, as I said before, is, I think the sense of the council is they're going to increase whatever number we put out. That's just my sense of it. And I think that to pick a lower number is sort of doing half of the work of the general counsel. And I think when it comes before us in the council chamber, I have gotten what I asked for here, which is some real information about the choices that need to be made to get to what we asked for last week. And now I have an opportunity to consult with constituents, to listen to my own heart, to think, and then decide with my one vote how we'll go forward with that. I'm reluctant to sort of make a pre-adjustment to that. That's just
Yeah.
that's just my opinion. Now, the
Yeah.
two of you may feel differently, and if that's what you feel, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, we're the ones in the conversation.
Yeah.
We're the ones sitting here today, having this, going
Right.
through this, and that's why, I'm having trouble with the physical numbers because numbers are not my thing. I don't want to increase all. I'm not going to support this. I think we absolutely need to turn to the council and say, we spent an hour and a half and we spoke to the school and this is our recommendation. Because I'm sure some of them will watch it, but I mean, ultimately, my understanding is this is our job as the finance committee,
Yeah.
is to say, we went through this process and this is our recommendation.
Mhm.
I'm just wanting to really clarify about what I'm voting on right now, because, I guess I'm just gonna vote no. I don't understand the nuances of all the numbers you're throwing around right now, but I am uncomfortable with all of these adjustments to date.
Just to be clear, perhaps I'll try to restate to make sure I have it recorded. The recommendation is essentially to have a further reduction of $300,000. Presumably it will come from somewhere on this page, unidentified as to where. That's really not the role of council. So is that,
That's my
Or
motion on the
everything-
floor, because again, we ultimately have to, we've already motioned and voted to make an adjustment to the town budget based on what Tom proposed. So now we're making a motion, same thing on the school side of what are we proposing to council as the amendment. And so my motion is 1.4 million. So I'm gonna call the vote, and if this doesn't pass, then I need someone else to propose a different motion of what we're gonna propose to council. So all those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, then I need another motion.
I'm gonna try to compromise, and this machine up here sort of works for me. Somebody else can translate it into an easy number
Mhm.
for the motion. But effectively, I think what you're getting at is to say, we'd like to moderate this some. Is that a fair understanding of what you're saying? Is that in effect, by putting in the number that you used, that on the school side, we've already got 4 from the school, and we're saying we're gonna take less than 8. That's in additional cuts. Is that fair understanding of it?
Do you have a specific motion that you would like to put forward for consideration for what we're gonna bring to the council around the school budget?
Yeah, in the spirit of compromise, I changed that number to 600,000 and translate it to whatever that translates to in terms of your number. So Somebody do that math for me.
So that would be essentially a 1.6.
I rounded it off. I kept the 221 and rounded off. That's okay.
So 1.6?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would.
So that would
propose
translate, I'm sorry, that would translate to
7.
Yeah, well, sorry, 1.7.
Translate to a net budget increase of 3.82%, and then exclusive of the reval, tax rate increase of, 1.09%.
So I'll make that motion.
So that's a net reduction of 1.7
Mhm.
and some change.
I'll go first. I'm not gonna support that. I think that's too high. I wouldn't support that at second read. I would motion it down, and so I don't want to put something forward that I don't feel like would be appropriate, and I think that number is just too high for me. Counselor Shoup?
The original reductions that you made was the 1,999,000, right? This 1,000,000. In the first read, I'm looking at this reduction from school board first to second read. I mean, my motion would be to support no further reductions. But I don't know what number to put on that.
You could just,
I just want to be clear, nothing on this page has been moved by this committee or any other.
I'm,
And Kate has done the math, and you may be confused that it seems to suggest that these things have been done previously. They've not. They are firmly in front of you to do what you will with them.
mhm.
Reduction that has been made so far by the school board at their second reading is that 1.1 million that you're looking at. 1,099,779
Right.
is where the school board last voted. The reductions that have been taken,
Mhm.
Right, so the discussion is beyond the 1.1. I'm rounding up
right?
to 1.1.
Now we're at 1.7. Based on, the motion we're discussing right now is $1.7 million.
Mr. Chairman, you need a second.
no, there's no second, so that
So-
motion is
Oh,
dead.
well then
So I was looking for a new motion
okay.
that would be no further reductions to the school budget.
So are you saying you're motioning
Yes.
essentially what the school board voted at their second read? Which was this 1 point,
I mean, if we could go back to the original budget, I'd love to start there, but I mean, if we're gonna
okay,
do reductions, these are the experts, and I think they went through and did what they felt they could to date. I think anything further would be hurtful and impactful, considering, again, the level of emails and interactions we've received from residents who specifically are very concerned about the cuts in the force and things that'll come. And the other consideration is if this gets voted down, we are gonna have to start doing this, and I don't think we should be doing it now.
So, John, it sounds to me like your number is the compromise number.
that was my intent, was
That
to
was
be
your
the
intent.
compromise number.
Well, yes, and so Karen is up here, I'm down here, you're in the middle.
Mhm.
So maybe you should make your motion again.
I'm not sure if a motion to do nothing is necessary, frankly. I don't, with all due respect, think it's needed.
Are we making a recommendation?
And effectively, by your prior motion earlier this evening, you already accepted what the Board of Education did in their second reading, which was the 1.099
Mhm.
adjustment.
Great.
So you want to add,
So can I do a different motion? I'm gonna move, and I'm just gonna keep it super simple. That we just move. I move that we adjust their budget with a total reduction of 1,385,029.
second,
Discussion.
No.
No? All those in favor? All those opposed? All right, motion passes. So that will be what we bring to the council. Can we put that in here, Norm? And
Yeah, I need some help on that number. I didn't
It's
All of you.
1,385,029.
Oh, I see.
So that's accepting the
The
green.
green, accepting the green.
I'm not accepting the green.
But-
I'm just using that to get
But
to a
that
number.
helps. That-
Yeah, so up to you guys ultimately to come back and figure out if that's how you would actually do that.
So Norm captured it.
So what's it's the difference between.
Okay, so it's
So
Yeah, it's modeled up there now.
Yes.
it would be a 1.47% tax
1.47.
increase.
0.47
Yep.
tax increase for the town and the,
and a 4.21 increase in the
Net budget.
net budget.
And can you show us adding in the fund balance again, what that does?
You want all of it?
Yeah, let's just to see what it does.
Get you to 0.3. And a net budget increase of 3.01.
Okay. Do you guys want to discuss and make a recommendation on fund balance, or do we want to just allow council to ultimately decide? Right now, we don't have to make any changes. It's in the order. So we could leave it as is.
It's included.
It's already included. And so we can, at the second read, motion to make an adjustment if we want to, either to pull it out completely or reduce that number. While we have this model, I'm just like, if you want to see what a different number could look like, we can look at it.
I think the recommendation is not really necessary when you can pull this up on the screen and say, this is what happens. There's sort of two data points. One is that we think using the fund balance in this way is not going to adversely affect our financial position, bond rating, et cetera. And if we did so, that's what it would do to the tax rate. It seems to me that our colleagues ought to be able to sweat that out without any additional help from us.
Yeah.
So that's. what-
The only distinction is how it's postured. Right now, it is included, and it will continue to be included, so the council's free to modify it if they wish.
Take it out. That's my feeling. Richard.
Would you like to motion for that?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we remove the fund balance from our calculations such that the math reflects what's on this spreadsheet.
I'll second for discussion.
Well, you're removing it from the calculations. Are you removing it from the budget?
From the in other words, if you, when I follow this down
Yeah.
here, it shows what the choices are. So that red box there is a choice. And I'm happy with that because you all have done your work here.
Mhm.
And we're saying we've moderated that choice. Others can look at this and say, we'd like that number to be bigger or smaller. So I think our position here is to say this was a compromise to get us moving forward. Then we can move down and say, and that if we don't do anything else, that's going to increase the average homeowner, meaning that one person in town whose property value increased exactly on the average rate means that their taxes will go up by 1.47%. And for that same average homeowner, if we further reduce our burden by $985, then that average homeowner will see their taxes go up by 0.3%. So that seems to be fairly simple and easy to understand. It'll obviously have different impacts on people depending on where they stand in the reval, but we just separate the reval out of it. That says all things being equal, that's what these numbers do to your taxes, which is what I think people want to know.
All right. Thoughts, comments?
I think it's our job to recommend if we use it or not. I think we have a financial advisor and a town manager and a bond guy who all told us that it is reasonable for us to use it this year. It is within our policy. We'll be in violation of our policy if we actually don't start using our funds in the next year. Again, if I was not on finance committee and I was on the normal council, I would not understand this concept. So I do feel I want to, and I will be giving a recommendation, and if we could make one together, I think that's great. But obviously, there will be a conversation within the council level, but I do think as the
So-
finance committee members, it is our job to say, this is our recommendation.
Mhm.
So your point is what seems fairly straightforward to me might not seem as straightforward to the remaining council, and that we should offer some guidance. Is that
I think if you're not on finance, this is just very hard to grasp and understand the financial policies and the consequences of using it, of not using it, bond ratings and things like that.
Well, I have two feelings about it. One, it seems to me that it would be fine for us to say that we see no adverse impact in using these funds. I think we can say that directly, and that they would have the effect of lowering taxes by this much, which we generally regard as a positive thing. I'd be happy to make that motion, because I think that really ferrets out what the bottom line issue here is our job was to say, can we use this money and use it responsibly? I think the answer to that is yes. I'm just mindful of the fact that there are other folks out there who have an entirely different view of the thing for philosophical reasons, and we can sort that out in the public. So if you'd be willing to entertain a motion that says that the finance committee feels that using the fund balance would be, at this time, would be a responsible use of the funds, I'll be happy to make that
So-
statement. It's a little nuanced.
Yeah,
but
we gotta vote on the motion you had originally, which was to remove it. So why don't we
Let's do that.
vote? So right now we're voting on a motion to remove it from the budget order.
Yes.
So all those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, motion fails. So now do you want to offer a new motion? Or I will offer the motion that we, as a finance committee, recommend maintaining the 985,000 fund balance in the budget order. Period.
Second,
Discussion. So again, for me, it's already in there. So if we choose to debate it, Tom, somebody could motion to split the question. I actually feel like it might be valuable to split the question at the beginning to make sure we could separate.
It's not part of your motion to adjust. It's already in the
Yeah.
budget. So it would require a separate amendment to modify that number from what was proposed.
So council.
So I don't think it will complicate your motion because it's not part of it.
So I mean, I feel like it's in there. It's definitely gonna get debated.
Yep.
If somebody wants to take it out, reduce it, they can prepare an amendment, but I think for us, I think we want it in play, at least for discussion. So keeping it in there as is at this point to allow for that discussion, and I've said I'm pretty supportive of using it, so I have no problem keeping it in there.
Yep.
You know, depending on where we land, you know, I may look to adjust it less. Maybe it's not the full 985. I could see myself pulling that number down potentially. So that we're still leveraging it to some degree to reduce tax impact, but maybe not to the full 985. But again, I need to think about that a little bit more, but right now, 985, the way it is, I'm supportive of. Any other comments? No? All right, all those in favor? All those opposed? All right, motion passes. It's gonna be a fun budget meeting, I can tell.
So this is what we're gonna do. I'll work with Kate, but we'll produce a sheet very similar to this. Likely we'll add a line that includes the 285, 250 under operating. Reduction, we're not gonna be specific as to where it comes from. So it will reflect your actions. And then we'll modify the budget order to reflect how these adjustments affect the various parts of the budget order.
I have to say, this spreadsheet was the most helpful thing so far.
Okay, good.
So.
We should probably have that handy for council conversation.
We'll simplify it and have it handy. Mr. Chairman, I'd ask if you could put a request out to your colleagues on council if they intend to offer motions to the further motions to the budget to amend. We're pleased to help, and I would recommend that we have some awareness. This is complicated stuff, and I'd love to help support folks so they can offer a cogent motion that it does what they want it to do. So your help would be appreciated if you asked for councilors to come forward, and we're pleased to support them.
I'll include that in my update.
Thank you.
So again, thank you guys so much for coming. Sorry for the sausage making, but that's part of the process, but appreciate, again, all the work you've done up to this point. And,
Sir?
you know, at our next finance committee meeting, we're likely going to do retrospective on the process. So I mentioned that to Carolyn, so I invite you guys to come as well. This year was a unique year with some of the stuff we're dealing with, so hopefully next year, to your point, it's not as painful, but I think, you know, unfortunately, that's where we are. But again, I would hope you guys can come to our June meeting and kind of share your perspectives of lessons learned and what we can do better next year. With that, we have another item for public comment on the agenda, so I'm going to open it up for public comment. If there's anybody in the public who would like to offer comment.
Great, so. Drew Hamel. First, I just want to say, it's a, tremendous amount of work. Thank you. But I will say that looking at a lot of the reductions, the so-called cuts, they really have been refinements in estimates. New information. We go through this every year, and I'd be curious, I may even try to do this, to put together a total amount of what those really were as a percentage of the total cuts that we got. But what I really wanted to talk about is the wage and salary increases. And I'm, keep harping on this, but it is 70 to 80% of our total budget, both the town and the school. And what we do with the town staff by giving them a 6% increase sets the tone for all the collective bargaining agreements that are under negotiation this year. And they look over and they see a 6% increase and a 6% increase last year. Some people got more. And we didn't pay too much attention to it last year. So we're looking at staff that got pretty much a 12 to 14% increase. That is a huge amount of money in 2 years. And I just don't think it's necessary at all. There are other ways. If you're having trouble attracting people, there's sign-on bonuses. There are other ways that don't involve building in those increases to, forever. And I know that there are companies around here, they're not giving increases like what the town is. And when you make decisions like that to give staff a 6% increase, it means that there are other choices that you've also made, and choices like having to defer the facility study, which I think is a very worthwhile project and needs to be done. And in fact, I had someone today ask me, well, I'm on the school building project, but there's also a community center project going. And why are those two groups not talking to each other? Why are we not coordinating? And I think I have the feeling that if we had a facilities study completed, there might be more direction to do those things. And the same thing, Karen, I know you were talking about a wastewater or stormwater study that you wanted. And when you give the staff a 6% increase and you add up the amount of money, because it got built into the 777,000 that was one of the drivers for the union staff, that forgoes. I mean, now you've closed off a whole range of, we're making cuts on projects that are important. And so I think that it's really unfortunate that that was one decision that got made and is not being reconsidered at all. And the final thing is that this reval is causing a structural shift in the way taxes are paid in this community. That we used to have 25% of our taxes were paid by the commercial sector, and 75% by the residents. And this shift that is happening this year, so that it might be, it's going to 22% commercial. And that is not going to change next year. That basically is a structural shift that will continue at least until we have our next reval. And I think that means there are consequences that the budget need to be made in the budget to reflect the fact that more of the tax burden is on residential taxpayers. And I'm sorry to say, I didn't really see that happen. So, thanks.
Great, thank you. Debbie, it looks like you have your hand raised. If you unmute, you should be able to talk.
I'm there. Hi, Debbie Gates, 423 Black Point Road. I just have 3 comments sort of directed to each counselor. And first, Counselor Anderson, I just wanted to, as a former realtor in a different part of the country for 25 years, you made a comment at the beginning of the meeting that you really expect that real estate prices are going to level out in Scarborough, that we're just seeing this huge COVID bump. To me, that flies in the face of what Scarborough and Southern Maine's plans are for growth, which means people, which means housing, which means putting Southern Maine on the map of a desirable place to be, which, yes, came because of COVID, but I don't think that's going away. And I don't think the state of Maine or Scarborough wants that to go away. So I don't think that Scarborough is going to stay and is not staying the affordable rural community suburb to Portland that it has been historically. So that caught my ear because it just doesn't ring true to me.
Mhm.
And Counselor Shoup, I appreciate you advocating for the parents of kids that have in school. And I hear you when you say, what are we going to do if the voters don't approve the school budget? Because as we all know, that's what gets voted on, not the town. My question back to you would be, why wasn't the focus for you more on the town budget, where you could have, had made as impassioned arguments for cutting things in order to help the school not have to cut as much? And it's my personal opinion, and I think the voters reflect this time and time again, that the town, in the short time that we've lived here, has spent a lot of money on consultants about capital projects that end up not passing the voters, I think because they're not properly financially vetted, and the voters figure that out and won't pass the library, and they didn't pass the new school project. So I would encourage, maybe it's over, maybe the town budget's already accepted and now it's just the poor school that's in the crosshairs. But boy, I would have appreciated your passion on the town side as well, budget. And Counselor Cushing, I really have to take exception with your divisive, in my opinion, summary of the school survey results. My understanding is that, and I was there last November when it was decided we needed a survey to find out very specifically why the voters in Scarborough had turned down the school project. And interestingly, the survey recently done reflects the same numbers. I think the canard that you were suggesting, though, was that this survey reflects taxpayers, 50% of taxpayers in Scarborough not willing to support the schools is wrong. And I think it's divisive. I think it's negative. I think that the new community committee that I have watched online have come up most recently with some great options, great things to look into, certainly scathing remarks about Harriman's report financially, from a financially point of view. And so I take exception to suggest that we have a community that 50% of us don't support the schools. We just want things fiscally responsibly done. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Debbie. All right, is there anybody else in the public who would like to comment? No? All right, with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, all those in favor? All right, thank you, guys.